I slid the paper across that shiny table and watched my oldest boy go white as a sheet. I put my finger right on the notary stamp, right on the date, and I told him the truth. I could not have signed this deed, son, because on the day some stranger swears I sat down and signed away my own house. I was standing over your daddy's casket. The room went dead quiet. My daughter, a grown woman, a doctor would not lift her eyes off the carpet. My whole life I read papers for strangers, I said, and now this piece of paper is testifying against my own child. My name is Lorraine Marsh. I am 69 years old, and for more than 30 years I sat at a closing table and read the fine print so other folks would not get robbed. If you're listening from somewhere far away, drop your city in the comments. And please, stay with me until the end. The rain came down in cold. Steady little needles that autumn night. The kind that gets into your bones and just sets up house. I was sitting in the doorway of a shut-down storefront, back pressed against a door that was not mine, on a street that was not mine, in a life that all of a sudden was not mine either. On my lap, I had a black garbage bag. Inside it was 2 changes of clothes, a thin blanket, and a couple of photo albums with the corners worn soft. Beside me sat a little suitcase with a busted wheel that would not roll straight anymore. That was it. 69 years of living. And everything I had left in this world fit into a trash bag and a broken suitcase. Across the street, a billboard lit up the whole wet block, big and bright and impossible to ignore. A man in a slate gray suit smiling down at the traffic like he owned it. And truth be told, he owned a good chunk of it. The words underneath read Marsh Development Group, building the future of Cherokee County. Folks driving by at that red light, they looked up at that billboard and they saw a rich, successful man, a winner, somebody who had it all figured out. You want to know what I saw? I saw a little boy with a gap in his teeth who used to climb in my lap during thunderstorms because the noise scared him half to death. I saw the child I bathed in a cramped little bathroom with a leaky faucet, the one I held against my chest all night long when his fever spiked and would not break. That grinning man up on the billboard was my firstborn, Preston Marsh, my son. A couple of cars idled at the light. I watched the people inside glance my way and then look real quick at their phones, at the radio, at anything that was not me. I knew that look. Hell, I used to give that look. To them, I was just some old woman huddled in a doorway, probably hoping for spare change, probably not worth the trouble. They had no idea I raised 3 kids. They had no idea I once had a house of my own with a big oak tree out front that my husband and I planted with our own 2 hands the week we got the keys. They had no idea that the very reason I was sitting out in that cold rain was locked up tight in the county records office, in black and white, with my forged name sitting right there on it. I looked down at my hands, old hands now, spotted and thin, the knuckles gone stiff and knotty. But these hands used to be something. These hands carried 3 babies on this hip and a laundry basket on the other at the same time. These hands typed up closing documents and land transfers and security deeds for more than 30 years down at Halloran and Pike, back when I was the paralegal everybody in the office came to when a file did not add up. I could smell a bad signature from across a desk. I could catch a doctored date, a missing seal, a name that leaned the wrong way. That was my whole entire job. Protecting regular people from the exact kind of thing that had just happened to me. And is not that just the sorriest joke you ever heard? Lorraine Marsh, the woman who spent her whole working life telling folks, do not you dare sign a thing until you read every word, ended up out on a wet sidewalk because she trusted the wrong person and did not read a damn thing. I want to know where you're listening from tonight. What state? What country? Leave it down in the comments, because it does me good to know how far this old voice can travel. My phone sat heavy in my coat pocket, the battery hanging on by a thread. In it were 3 names that used to be my whole world. Preston, Sharon, Wade. Tomorrow, come daylight, I was going to have to decide whose door I was going to knock on. I did not know yet that 2 of those doors were going to slam shut in my face, and that the answer to everything that went wrong had been sitting in a filing cabinet the whole time, just waiting on somebody with old eyes and a paralegal's memory to go dig it out. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me back up to the start, to when we were young and broke and happy, and none of us had any idea what was coming. Preston and Hank and me, we started out with next to nothing. And I mean that. When Hank Marsh and I got married, we had a rusted out Ford, a rented room over a hardware store, and about $40 between us that we kept in a coffee can on the windowsill. But Lord, we had plans. Hank used to sit on the edge of the bed at night and talk about the little house he was going to build me someday, and I would tell him to hush and go to sleep. But secretly, I loved every word of it. Preston came along early, before we ever had a place of our own. A squalling little thing born in the back bedroom of that rented room. And he came out ambitious. I swear to you, he came out of the womb wanting more. It took us a few more years of scraping and saving and going without, but we did it. We bought a little 3-bedroom place over in Woodstock, nothing fancy. Wood floors that creaked and a kitchen that needed work, but it was ours. I will never forget standing on that front porch the day we got the keys. Hank had grease under his fingernails and the biggest grin I ever saw on a grown man. "Lorraine," he said, "starting today we finally got a home of our own." And then because he was Hank and he could not sit still to save his life, he went and bought a little oak sapling from the nursery down the road and we planted it right there in the front yard that same afternoon. That tree is 30-some years tall now. Somebody else's shade. I used to think, but I am getting ahead again. Hank opened up his own little woodworking shop after that. Cabinets and built-ins and the occasional fancy staircase for the rich folks up in the new subdivisions. He was good with his hands, better than good. And me, I went to work down at Halloran and Pike, a real estate law office right off the square. I started out answering phones and I worked my way up to paralegal, and I found out I had a knack for it. I could read a stack of closing documents and just feel it in my gut when something was off. A date that did not line up, a signature that trembled where it should not. Old man Halloran used to call me over just to have me look, and he would say, "Lorraine, you got the eyes God gave a hawk." I was proud of that. It was honest work, and I was good at it. We had our other 2 children in that house. After Preston came Sharon, sharp as a tack and twice as proud, the kind of little girl who corrected the teacher and got away with it because she was usually right. And last came Wade, my baby, my sweet, slow-to-anger boy who would rather fix a thing than argue about it. Money was always tight, but we made it stretch. At night after the kids were down, Hank and I would sit at the kitchen table and count out the week's bills into little piles. And Hank, he had this thing he liked to say, "Preston is going to be somebody big one day. Sharon is going to be a doctor. And Wade, well, all that matters is that Wade turns out to be a good man." Turned out he was right on every count, though not one bit the way he pictured it. When Preston got into a good business school up in Atlanta, we did not have the money, not even close. So we sold off a little parcel of land Hank had inherited from his daddy, land we always figured we would pass down someday, and we handed every dollar of it to Preston for his tuition. Hank called it his boy's seed money. "He needs a better running start than we got," Hank told me, and I did not argue, because I believed it too. Then a few years on, Sharon decided she wanted medical school. "Just help me get through this one thing, Mama," she said. "And once I am a doctor, everything gets easier for all of us." So we tightened the belt one more notch. Hank picked up weekend carpentry jobs till his hands cracked, and I took on every bit of overtime the office would give me. Some nights driving home so tired I do not rightly remember the drive. And through all of it, Wade never asked us for a single thing. Not one. After he finished high school, he went straight to work, framing houses, pouring concrete, learning a trade the hard way with his back and his hands. Sometimes he would come by the shop and help his daddy on the weekends, and not even take the money Hank tried to slip him. I used to lie awake feeling guilty over it, if I am honest with you. Like Hank and I had poured every dollar and every prayer we had into Preston and Sharon, and my quiet middle boy, my Wade, just stood off to the side smiling and taking whatever was left over, which usually was not much. I did not know it then, sitting at that kitchen table counting nickels. But I was learning something about my own children that would not come due for another 30 years. I was watching who took and who gave, and who just quietly showed up. You do not see the shape of a person when they are 7 and asking for pancakes. You see it later, when the storm hits and you find out who runs toward you and who bolts the door. There is one more thing from those years I need you to know, because it matters to how all this ends. My kids grew up around my work. Papers all over the kitchen table, closing files I brought home, deeds and titles and affidavits. And I used to make a little game of it. I would lay 2 signatures side by side and ask them, all right, which one is the real one and which one is the copy? Preston never had the patience for it. Sharon got bored quick. But I taught all 3 of them how a notary seal works, how it presses the date right into the page, how you cannot fake the little things without leaving a mark somewhere. I taught my own children how forgery works. I just never once imagined I was raising one who would need to know. Everything changed the winter Hank got sick, and it changed slow at first, which is the cruelest way. It started with a cough that would not quit. I nagged him for a month to go see somebody, and being a stubborn old mule, he kept telling me it was just the sawdust and the cold shop. Then one morning he could not catch his breath tying his own boots, and I put my foot down and drove him to the doctor myself. The word they used was congestive, and then they used a word for his lungs I made him spell out for me twice. And by the time all the fancy words were said and done, what it came down to was this. My husband's heart and his lungs were both giving out at the same time, and there was not going to be any fixing it, only slowing it down. He was 70 years old. We had been married a lot of years. I sat in that little exam room holding his rough old hand, and I felt the floor tilt right out from under me. For 2 years we fought it. 2 years of specialists up in Atlanta, of pills lined up in a plastic organizer the size of a tackle box, of oxygen tanks and follow-ups, and drives home where neither one of us said a word because there was not a word big enough. Our savings, the little cushion we had built up over a lifetime of counting nickels at that kitchen table. It drained away one copay and one prescription at a time. Now I want to be straight with you, because it matters later. The medical bills were real, and they hurt, but they did not sink us. We were tight, we were scared, but we were managing. And the house, our little house with the oak tree, it was near about paid off by then. 30 years of mortgage payments, and we were down to the last stretch. That house was ours, free and clear and almost done, and it was the one solid thing I had left to stand on. Sharon was a full doctor by that time, and you would think that would have been a blessing, having a physician in the family. But when I called her, near tears, asking her to help me make sense of her daddy's treatment plan, all I got was, "This really is not my specialty, Mama, but I can help you file the insurance paperwork." Her own father, filing paperwork. Preston did worse, which is to say he did nothing at all. Just breezed in once in a while with an expensive fruit basket and a story about how slammed he was, stayed 20 minutes, checked his phone the whole time, and breezed back out. Only Wade showed up. My baby boy drove over 4 times a week after 10-hour days on a job site, still in his dusty work clothes. He built a ramp for the oxygen cart. He sat with his daddy and watched the ball game so I could sleep. He never once made me ask. Hank passed on a Tuesday in the early spring of last year. I was holding his hand. Near the end, he pulled me down close because his voice had gone to almost nothing, and he said, "Take care of the kids, Lorraine. Especially Wade. He is the softest one. The world will try to take advantage of him." And then a little while later, he let go. All those years. And the house went so quiet I could hear the refrigerator hum in the next room. Now here is where the wolf came to my door dressed like my own son, and I did not see it. Because grief makes you blind, and it makes you tired, and it makes you grateful for any hand that reaches out. About 2 weeks after the funeral, before I had even washed all the casserole dishes the neighbors brought, Preston showed up at my door. And he was. I have to tell you, he was so gentle, so kind. It caught me off guard, because it was not like him, not one bit. He sat at my kitchen table and held my hand and told me, "Mama, you have been through hell, and you should not have to deal with all this legal mess on top of it. Daddy's estate, the probate, the deed, the title, all of it. Let me handle it for you. You just rest. And Lord, forgive me. I let him, me, Lorraine Marsh, the woman who spent 30 years at a closing table telling frightened old widows, do not you sign one single thing until you have read every last word and understood it. I handed my grieving heart right over to the one child who had never once earned it. He had me sign a few little forms, he said, just routine estate paperwork to transfer things into my name proper. And he needed copies of my driver's license and my social security card and Hank's death certificate, all of which sounded exactly right, because I had prepared that exact same kind of packet 1,000 times myself. So I signed where he pointed and I did not read a word, because I was crying, and because he was my son, and because when your child looks you in the eye 2 weeks after you buried your husband and says, let me carry this for you, you want so bad to believe you raised somebody who would. I found out later, much later, that a few of those little forms I signed were not what he said they were, and that the ones that mattered, the ones that put me out on that wet sidewalk, I never signed at all. He did not need me to. He had my signature to copy, my license to prove who I was, and he had somebody willing to press a false stamp onto a lie. But I am getting ahead again. That day, all I knew was that my oldest boy had finally shown up for me, and I cried grateful tears the whole time I signed my own life away. The letters started coming a few months later. At first, I stacked them with the grocery flyers, the way you do. Then the envelopes started wearing red ink. Final notice. Delinquent. I called Preston in a panic, and he was smooth as glass. Mama, do not you worry about those, he said. That is just some of Daddy's old medical debt catching up. The hospital sold it to a collector. It happens all the time. I am on it. I am working on a refinance to clear the whole thing. Just do not open those letters. They will just upset you. And God help me. I believed him because he sounded so sure, and because I did not want to be a burden, and because he was in real estate. He did this for a living. Who was I to question him? What I did not know was that the loan paperwork listed a mailing address that was not mine, so half the notices that would have set off every alarm bell I had, I never even saw. The morning they came to put me out, it was cold and the sky was that flat gray that does not promise anything good. 2 Cherokee County Sheriff's deputies, a fellow from the lending company with a clipboard, and a little moving crew stood on my front lawn under the oak tree. Hank and I had planted the week we bought the place. I stood on my own porch in my house shoes and I could not make it make sense. Wade and Dana had come at dawn, both of them white as paper. Mama, get your clothes, your papers, your photo albums. Wade kept saying, low and steady, trying to keep me moving. Dana wrapped my good dishes in newspaper with shaking hands. There was Hank's big oak dresser in the bedroom, the one he built for me for our 20th anniversary, heavy as a Buick, and there was just no way, no time and no truck big enough, so we had to leave it standing against the wall. I grabbed our wedding picture off the top of it and put it in my bag, and I left the dresser where it stood. And I did not know then that I was leaving something else behind too, something that would not matter for a long while yet. The lending fellow was taping a foreclosure notice to my front door as I handed over my keys. I am sorry, ma'am, he mumbled, not looking at me, just doing my job, and I just nodded, because what else is there? But here is the thing. As I signed the deputy's paper acknowledging I had to vacate, my eye ran down the page the way 30 years of habit makes it run, and it snagged on a number, the amount owed, and even standing there on the worst morning of my life, some cold, clear paralegal part of my brain sat up and said, Lorraine, that number is wrong. That is way too much money. We near paid this house off. Where in God's name did all that debt come from? I was too broke down that morning to chase the thought. I let the deputies walk me to Wade's rusty pickup, and I let my baby boy drive me away from the only home I ever owned, with everything I had left riding in the truck bed under a tarp. But that number, that wrong, ugly number, it lodged itself somewhere in the back of my mind like a splinter you cannot see to pull, and it would not stop working its way in. I did not sleep that first night at Wade's place, and the next morning I made up my mind to do the thing that shamed me most. I was going to go ask my two successful children to take in their own mother. Wade drove me. He did not have a job on the site that day, and I think even if he had, he would have called off. We rode out of his run-down little apartment block and across town toward the nice part of the county, past sign after sign that read Marsh Development Group, my own name on billboards while I sat in a truck with a garbage bag of clothes behind the seat. Preston lived in one of those gated communities where the lawns look vacuumed. There was a guard booth and a wrought iron gate, and Wade's beat-up pickup sat idling there, sticking out like a sore thumb until the guard made a call and the gate rolled open slow. Preston's house was one of those big white things, columns and all, two shining SUVs in the driveway. Wade put the truck in park. "I will wait right here, Mama," he said, and I could tell he did not want to. I walked up that long stone path and I knocked on a heavy front door, and it opened, and there stood Bethany, Preston's wife, in a sweater that probably cost more than Wade made in a week. "Oh, Lorraine," she said, and the way her face fell told me everything before anybody said another word. Preston came into the front hall behind her, hair combed, phone in his hand. When he saw me, his smile went stiff and quick, the way a man smiles when the wrong person shows up at the wrong time. "Mama," he said, "why did not you call first?" And his eyes went right past me, out to the street, checking to see who might be watching. I told him plain. I said, "The bank took the house, son. I stayed at Wade's last night, but it is real tight over there, and I just need somewhere to be for a little while. I will clean. I will cook. I will not be a bit of trouble. I just need a corner." Bethany let out this long breath through her nose. "Preston," she said, "the girls from the club are coming for the charity luncheon at noon." And she let that sentence just hang there, like I was a stain on the carpet somebody would have to explain. Preston rubbed the back of his neck. "Mama, it is not that simple," he said. "The guest rooms are full. I run my whole business out of the home office. I have got clients in and out of here. You understand how it would look, a man in my position with his." And he stopped himself. But I heard the end of that sentence anyway. "With his homeless mama sleeping on the floor. Just a cot," I said. "Just a corner of the garage. Preston, I do not care. Please do not do this," he said, and he actually looked pained, like I was the one being unreasonable. "I will help you some other way. I will send Wade some money for rent. I will find you a motel, but not here. It just is not a good time." Bethany was already moving, easing herself between me and the doorway, real polite about it. "Let us step outside. Lorraine," she said, "we do not want to stand here in the open door, the neighbors and all." And before I could get another word out, she pulled that big door shut, and I heard the deadbolt turn. A hard little click, right in my face. I stood there a second on that fine stone step. On the other side of that door was the little boy who used to crawl in my lap during thunderstorms. And now that grown man was more scared of what the ladies from the country club might think than he was of his own mother out in the cold. I turned around and walked back down the path, and Wade took one look at my face and did not ask. He just said, real quiet, "Where to, Mama?" I said, "Take me to your sister's." Sharon's neighborhood was every bit as nice, all iron gates and landscaping crews. I did not even get past the front porch. She came marching out in her white coat with her hospital badge still clipped on and a leather bag over her shoulder, already looking at her watch. "Mama, what is this?" she said, not hello, not are you okay, just what is this? She did not ask me in. She let me sit on a patio chair on the porch like a delivery I had not ordered. I told her the same thing. The house is gone. Wade has no room. I just need somewhere to land. "Oh, Mama," she said, and she pulled out that voice, the one I have heard her use on patients who do not follow their diet. "I am slammed right now. My schedule is insane. If you are here, I am going to be worrying about you falling, getting sick, and then that is one more thing on my plate. The rooms are full. Kendall needs her study space for the SATs. I work nights. It just does not work. I have got nowhere else to go. Sharon," I said, and I hated how small my voice came out. And that is when she opened up that expensive purse and took out her wallet. and she pulled out a $20 bill and held it out to me. "Here," she said, "for gas and something to eat. There are programs for this, Mama. The state has programs. There are real nice senior facilities now. You cannot just keep leaning on your kids. We have got our own lives." I looked at that $20 bill sitting there in her manicured hand, and something in my chest just caved in quiet, because it was the exact same 20 I used to fold up and press into her palm on school mornings, back when Hank and I skipped our own lunches so our girl would have enough. I used to slip her a 20 and tell her, "Get yourself something good, baby." And now here she was handing it back to me like alms to a beggar, and she did not even know she was doing it. My hand shook when I took it, and I do not fully know why I took it, except that a lifetime of pride does not go all at once. "So I cannot stay," I said. "It is not that you cannot." "Mama," she said, already turning for the door, "I just cannot handle it right now. I have to go." And then she called back over her shoulder into the house, "Kendall, do not open this door for anybody you do not know. Do not open the door for anybody you do not know." That was me now, a stranger at my own daughter's house. She walked me to the gate, latched it with a clean little clank, and got in her BMW and drove off, and left me standing on the sidewalk, holding $20. Wade drove us home to that little apartment without much talking. The wind was coming up cold and mean, rattling something loose on the truck. Two big doors had slammed shut on me in one morning, and waiting at the end of the road was a flimsy, peeling wooden door in the sorry part of town. But behind that one door was the only place left in the whole world that still called me Mama and meant it. That apartment was a tight fit for the three of them before I ever showed up. And now there were 4 grown feet and a 7-year-old, sharing about 800 square feet. They put my thin mattress against the living room wall. There was a plastic bin in the corner with the rest of my life in it, and a space heater that rattled like it had rocks in it. And that was home now. Every morning, Wade left before light to go find work. And some days he found a full day of framing or drywall and came home at dusk gray with dust. And some days there was nothing, and he came home by noon with his jaw set and his shoulders down. One afternoon, while I was folding what little laundry we had, I heard Dana at the kitchen counter counting coins into little stacks, whispering to Wade, who had just come in. "This is enough for a loaf of bread and some eggs for a couple days," she said. "But the power bill is 2 months back. Honey," and they sent the shutoff. Wade pressed the heels of his hands into his eyes. "The big commercial job wraps next week," he said. "After that, I do not know." I stood there pretending to fold, and my heart just broke clean in two. I had lost my house, and now my kindest child was going under trying to keep his mama from drowning. And that same afternoon, the TV in the corner, that little old box set, was running the noon news. And there was Preston, cutting a red ribbon in a slate gray suit, big grin, Bethany beside him in a dress that shined. The words under him reading, "Local developer breaks ground on new project." Dana grabbed the remote and switched it fast, muttering something about how the news only ever loves rich folks. But the channel she landed on had a daytime health show, and wouldn't you know it, there was Sharon, crisp white coat, talking real earnest about how our community needs more compassion in medicine. The caption said Dr. Sharon Marsh Vaughn, my daughter, preaching compassion on the television, while her mother slept on a floor across town on the $20 she'd been shooed away with. Dana turned the whole thing off, and the room went dead quiet except for that rattling heater. Then the night came that broke something loose in me for good. Little Caleb, my grandbaby, 7 years old, spiked a fever after supper. Burning up, floppy and glassy-eyed, not himself at all. Dana got scared. I got scared. We all did. Wade got up and felt his boy's forehead, and you could see the math running behind his eyes. Even the walk-in clinic wanted a copay we did not have. The pantry had half a box of cereal and 3 cans of soup. The power was fixing to get cut. Outside it was dropping toward freezing. "I will just skip meals," I said, trying to make it lighter than it was. "I am old. I do not need much." "No, Mama," Dana said sharp. "What if you get sick too?" And Wade did not say anything at all. He just stood up, walked to their bedroom, and came back with a little scuffed velvet box in his hand. I knew that box. It was their wedding rings. Wade, Dana said, and put her hand over her mouth. I think it is time, he said real soft. I have got nothing else to give, honey. Let the rings go. What matters is Mama and Caleb eat and Caleb gets his medicine. I will buy you a better set when things turn around. I swear it. Dana was crying, but she wiped her face and she said, I did not marry a ring, Wade. I married you. Do it. And they got their coats. I sat there frozen with my sick grandbaby's hot little hand in mine, and I could not push a single word up out of my throat. Out there across this county, I had one child cutting ribbons on the news, and another one preaching compassion in a television studio. And in here, my youngest boy was pawning his wedding ring to buy his mother's supper. When Wade and Dana came back with a plastic sack of bread and eggs and milk and children's Tylenol and cough syrup, their bare hands red from the cold, I finally broke. I sobbed and I told them it was my fault. All of it, that I had brought this down on their heads. Wade sat down beside me on that thin mattress and put his dusty arm around me and said, Do not you say that, Mama. You wore yourself to the bone, putting all three of us through everything. It is our turn now. We are going to be all right long as we are together. And Dana, wiping her own eyes, said, Money comes and goes, Mama. Houses come and go. You only get one mother. I held Caleb until his fever finally broke sometime after midnight. And while I sat there in the dark with that rattling heater and my son's pawned hand ringing in my ears, something shifted in me that had never shifted in 69 years. For the first time in my whole life, I got angry, not at God, not at bad luck, at my own two children, and down underneath that anger, cold and quiet and steady, an old habit woke all the way up and started asking a question it would not let go of. That number on the foreclosure paper was wrong. Way too much money owed on a house we near about paid off. And I had spent 30 years knowing exactly what it means when the numbers on a document do not add up. Somebody was going to explain that number to me. I did not care whose son he was. The next morning, I did not tell anybody where I was going. I put on the one decent blouse I had left. I took $8 of Sharon's 20 for the bus, and I told Dana I needed to run some errands. She looked at me a second, and then she said, You go trust that gut of yours, Mama. That is what it was made for. I do not think she knew how right she was. There is a thing about county records that most folks never learn, and it is this. When somebody borrows money against a house, they have to record the paperwork down at the courthouse, in the clerk's office, where anybody can walk in off the street and look. It is public. Deeds, titles, security deeds, all of it, sitting in a filing system I had spent 30 years reading like a roadmap. Preston built his whole empire on people not knowing that. He never once figured his own mother would go down there and pull the file. The Cherokee County Records Office still smelled the same as it did when I used to run over there twice a week for Halloran and Pike, old paper and floor wax and cold coffee. And behind the counter, Lord love her, was Ruth and Pike, Old Man Pike's daughter-in-law, who I had known for 25 years. She took one look at me and came around the counter and hugged me and said she had heard about Hank and she was so sorry. And then she said, Lorraine, what do you need? And I said, Ruth Ann, I need to pull everything recorded against my house in the last 2 years. And I need it quiet. She did not ask me why. She just went and pulled it. And here's where my hands started to shake. So let me slow down and tell it the way it came. The first thing I found was the payoff figure, and it was the splinter I had been carrying since eviction morning, only now it was staring me full in the face. The debt secured against my house was $191,000. And I want you to understand, Hank and I had that house down to the last little bit of a 30-year note. We owed maybe $11,000 on it the day my husband died. 11. Somewhere between Hank's funeral and the sheriff at my door, $180,000 in new debt had gotten strapped to my house. That was the first twist in my stomach. I had never taken a dime against that house, never refinanced, never took a cash out, nothing. So where in God's name did $180,000 come from? I made Ruthen pull the actual security deed, the document itself, the one that pledged my home as collateral for all that money, and she slid it across the counter to me. and I put on my reading glasses. And I looked at it the way I had looked at 10,000 documents, just like it across 30 years. There was my name, Lorraine Fay Marsh, and there was my signature above it. Except it was not my signature. Now I want to tell you something, because you are not a paralegal, and you have not spent your life doing this. Most folks think a signature is a signature. It is not. Your signature is a habit your hand learned 50 years ago and never broke. The way I cross my L, the little hitch in my R where my old arthritis catches, the way I lift the pen at the end so the last letter tails off light. A forger can get the shape. They cannot get the habit. And whoever wrote my name on that deed got the shape near about right. Close enough to fool a stranger. Close enough to fool a title company that was not looking hard. But the R was wrong. My hand hitches on the R. This R ran smooth. And the whole thing sat too even on the line. Too confident. No tremor. And I have had a tremor in my writing hand since I was 62. But that is not what put the ice in my chest. What put the ice in my chest was the date. Right there under the forged signature was the notary block, the little stamp that a notary public presses onto a document to swear under law that yes, this person appeared before me on this date and signed this with their own hand, and the date pressed into that stamp. The day some notary swore up and down that Lorraine Fay Marsh sat down in front of her and signed away her home was the 9th of April of last year. I sat down. I had to. Ruth Ann came around the counter again, but I put my hand up. The 9th of April was the day we buried Hank. I did not sign one single piece of paper on the 9th of April of last year, because on the 9th of April of last year, I sat in the front row at the chapel in my black dress. And then I stood at the graveside with my 3 children beside me, watching them lower my husband of a lifetime into the ground. There were 200 people there. There was a program with the date printed on it. I still had one in a photo album in a plastic bin on Wade's floor. There was an obituary in the county paper. I could not have been in a notary's office signing a security deed because I was burying my husband, and half the county was watching me do it. The document was a forgery, not a mistake, not a mix-up, a flat-out forgery, and a stupid one, forged by somebody so arrogant or so shut that they never thought to check whether the poor grieving old lady had an alibi for the day they picked. And she did. She had the best alibi in the world. She was burying her husband. That was the moment. That was the one. If you want to know where this whole story turned. Standing at that counter with my dead husband's funeral in my mind and my forged name under my reading glasses. 30 years of instinct and 1 week of anger all came together at once, and I did not fall apart. I want you to hear that. I did not cry. I did not shake anymore. I did not call anybody. I reached into my purse, and I took out the little spiral notebook I used to carry to closings. And I clicked my pen, and I started writing down document numbers and dates in my neat little paralegal hand, cold and clear as a January morning, because I finally understood I was not a victim of bad luck. I was the victim of a crime, and crimes leave a paper trail. And reading paper trails was the one thing on this earth I was better at than my son ever gave me credit for. I asked Ruth Ann for one more thing before I left. I asked her who notarized it. The name stamped under that false oath was Colette Radley. I did not know the name, but I knew how to find out, and I knew a lawyer would know faster, and I knew I could not afford a lawyer. So Ruth Ann, God bless her, told me about a legal aid outfit downtown, a nonprofit that took on elder cases for free, and gave me the name of a woman there, Nadine Holloway. Nadine Holloway's office was nothing like the marble law offices I used to work near. It was a cramped little room with mismatched chairs and case files stacked on the windowsill, and she was maybe 50, sharp-eyed, no nonsense, with reading glasses pushed up in her gray hair. I laid it all out for her. The near paid-off house, the 191,000 in debt, the forged signature, the funeral day notary stamp. She listened without saying a word, and when I finished, she took off her glasses, and she looked at me straight, and she said something I have never forgotten. Mrs. Marsh, she said, I am going to be honest with you, because you are a professional and you deserve it straight. What you have got here is real, and it is serious. and a forged deed is void under Georgia law, which means legally that house never left your hands. But I want you to understand what you are signing up for. It's going to be long. Untangling a fraud like this can take months, maybe more. Whoever did this is going to fight. And if there is money involved, there is usually more people involved. And even if we win, and I think we can, you may not get back everything you lost. Some of it may just be gone. I am not going to stand here and promise you a miracle. What I can promise is that I will work it as hard as anybody alive. Do you still want to do this? I told her I had been reading documents like the one on her desk for longer than that young woman across the hall had been alive, and I was not going anywhere. She almost smiled. Then let us find out who Colette Radley is, she said. It did not take long, and every step of it made me sicker. Colette Radley was a notary public, licensed all above board on paper. But when Nadine ran her down, when we started pulling other documents Colette Radley had notarized around that same time, a pattern came up out of the water, like something you did not want to see. Her stamp was all over closings and transfers and loan documents tied to one company, over and over, deal after deal. A development company, Marsh Development Group, my son's company. She was not some random notary who made an honest mistake. She was Preston's notary, the one he used when he needed a stamp pressed onto something that could not stand the light of day. And her fee for swearing that a grieving widow signed a deed at her husband's funeral was, I am sure, a nice round number that showed up quiet in her account. That was the third twist of the knife, and it told me this was not one bad decision my son made in a panic. This was built. This had a machine behind it. This had a paid liar with a stamp. But it was the fourth thing that broke my heart clean, because up until then I could still tell myself maybe there was some explanation. Maybe the money at least went somewhere that made sense. Nadine followed the loan. It was not a bank loan, which was the whole reason it slipped through. It was a private hard money loan, the fast and loose kind, made for a business, made to a company. And the borrower on the note was not me at all. The borrower was a limited liability company called Vantage Ridge Partners. And when Nadine pulled the filings on Vantage Ridge Partners, the sole managing member, the man who owned it and ran it and signed for it, was Preston Marsh. My son had set up a shell company. He had borrowed $180,000 in that company's name. And then he had used my house, my paid-off house, the house Hank built our whole life inside of, as the collateral for his company's loan, by forging my name onto a security deed and paying a notary to swear I signed it at my husband's funeral. I never got a dollar of that money. Not one. It went straight into Vantage Ridge, and Vantage Ridge poured it into a project of his that was already sinking. A big commercial development out on the north end called the Landings at Sawney that had gotten upside down and hungry for cash. I was not his mother in this thing. I was collateral. I was a house he happened to own the key to. When his gamble started going bad, he looked around for something to throw into the fire to keep it going one more month, and the thing he grabbed was me. I sat in Nadine Holloway's cramped little office with all of it spread out on her desk. The forged deed, the funeral date, Colette Radley's fingerprints, the shell company with my boy's name on it, and I did not feel like crying anymore. I felt something colder and steadier than that. I finally understood the whole shape of it, and I understood something else too. Preston did not know yet that I knew. He still thought I was just a broke old woman sleeping on a floor, waiting for one of my children to feel sorry enough to take me in. He had no idea his mother had spent 30 years learning exactly how to take a man like him apart, one document at a time. Nadine filed a lis pendens the next week, which is a fancy Latin thing that just means she put a big red flag on the property records saying this house is in a legal fight. Nobody buy it. Nobody sell it. Nobody touch it. It was the first move, and it was a loud one, because the second that flag goes up, anybody watching that property gets a phone call. And there was somebody watching, because here is the thing I had not let myself think about all the way through yet. When you forge a security deed and run it through a private lender, somebody in the money business had to have looked at that paper. Somebody had to have seen $191,000 suddenly strapped to a paid-off house owned by a 68-year-old widow, and not asked one single question. And it turned out somebody did see it. Somebody in my own family. Sharon's husband, Gregory Vaughn, worked in mortgage lending, not at the little hard money outfit that made Preston's loan, but in the same small world. The kind of world where everybody's files cross everybody's desk eventually, where a man can pull up a property and see what is recorded against it if he has a mind to. And Gregory, it came out later, had a mind to, because a few months before the Liz pendants, back when the fraud was still fresh, Gregory had pulled my house up on his screen, maybe out of nosiness, maybe because Preston had come around asking him something careful and roundabout, and Gregory had seen it. He had seen a brand new security deed for a fortune on his mother-in-law's house, a house he knew good and well was near paid off, borrowed by a company he knew belonged to his brother-in-law. He knew. He knew months before I was ever put out on the street. And he went home and he told his wife. He told Sharon. And my daughter, my doctor, the one who stood in a television studio in a clean white coat and talked about compassion. My Sharon looked at what her husband showed her, understood that her brother had forged their grieving mother's name and mortgaged her out from under herself, and she decided to say nothing. That was the fifth thing, and it was the one that I could not read out loud in Nadine's office without my voice going, because I could almost understand Preston. Preston was drowning and he did an evil, cowardly thing to save himself. And evil at least has a reason behind it: greed, panic, the survival of a sinking man. But Sharon was not drowning. Sharon had a good house and a good practice and a BMW in the driveway. Sharon did not need one dime. She stayed quiet for the smallest, ugliest reason there is. Preston had promised, quiet the way men like Preston promise things, that he would take care of a business debt she and Gregory had gotten tangled in, if certain things just stayed inside the family, if nobody made a fuss, if Mama's little problem just worked itself out the way these things do. So she watched. She watched the letters come. She watched the sheriff put me out. She sat there in her white coat, and she watched her mother go from a paid-off house to a mattress on Wade's floor. And she knew the whole time exactly why it was happening and exactly who did it. And she handed me a $20 bill and told me to look into a nursing home. The morning I found out about Sharon, I went out and sat on the concrete step outside Wade's apartment by myself for a long while. Wade came out after a bit and sat down next to me, and I told him. I watched it land on him, because Wade loved his sister. He did, even after everything. And when it finished landing, he did not yell. He just looked out at the sad little parking lot and he said, real low, so it was not enough to slam the door on you, Mama. She had to hold it shut. And I did not have anything to say to that, because that was exactly it. Nadine had everything now: the forged deed, the impossible funeral date, Colette Radley, the paid notary, Vance Ridge Partners, and the money trail into Preston's dying project, and Gregory's fingerprints on a screen he never should have gone quiet about. She said it was time to bring them to the table, not to the courthouse, not yet, but to a room, with the truth laid out, and give them the chance to make it right, before it became the kind of thing that ends careers and marriages and puts people in front of a grand jury. She said sometimes when you show people the whole board, they fold. And sometimes, she said, they do something stupid instead. Either way, she said, we learn a lot. We set it for a Thursday in Nadine's little conference room. And I will be honest with you, I did not sleep the night before, but it was not fear that kept me up. It was something closer to the feeling I used to get the night before a big closing, back when a whole deal came down to whether I had read every page right. I had read every page right. I knew I had. They came in their nice cars, the way they always did. Preston in a charcoal suit, Bethany with a handbag she held in front of her like a shield, Sharon in her scrubs, straight from the hospital, chin up, already annoyed, Gregory beside her with his corporate face bolted on tight. They all filed into that shabby little room with its mismatched chairs, and I watched them clock the cheapness of it and relax a half inch. Because to them, a free legal aid office meant their old mother had nothing: no real lawyer, no real teeth. They thought they were walking into a room to manage a confused old woman. They sat down across that table from me, thinking they were still holding all the cards. Preston went first, smooth the way he came out of the womb. Mama, he said, spreading his hands, we are all real worried about you. This whole thing, the house, it has just been a terrible mess of Daddy's medical debt, and I have been trying to sort it out. But you running off to lawyers behind our backs, it just makes it harder. We are your family. Let us help you. And Sharon nodded along and added, in that doctor voice, honestly, Mama, we have been concerned about your memory, about you making decisions on your own right now, given the stress. And there it was, laid right on the table, the thing they had been building toward, the word they wanted a judge to hear. Incompetent. They had come to that room ready to say their mother had lost her mind, so they could take control of the very fraud they were sitting on. Nadine let them finish. She let Preston get all the way through his fruit basket speech, and Sharon get all the way through her diagnosis of me. And then she slid a single folder across the table and she said, before we go any further, I would like everyone to look at this. It was a competency evaluation. I had gone, the week before, to a board-certified independent doctor, a psychiatrist with no connection to this family, and I had sat for 2 hours and answered every question they could throw at me. And the report in that folder said, in plain professional language, that Lorraine Fay Marsh was of completely sound mind, sharp memory, full reasoning, no sign of any decline whatsoever, and fully competent to manage her own affairs. Sharon's face went a shade paler as she read it, because she was a doctor. She knew exactly what that document did. It took the incompetent card and it burned it. There was not going to be any guardianship. There was not going to be any taking control of the confused old lady, because the old lady was, on the record, sharper than the three of them put together. And then, while that was still sinking in, I opened my own folder, mine, not Nadine's, and I did the thing I had spent 30 years doing for other people. I read the document out loud. I started with the payoff. I told them, calm as you please, that this house carried $11,000 of debt the day their father died, and $191,000 the day the sheriff put me out. And I asked, just as a matter of curiosity, if any of them could explain where $180,000 came from, since I never borrowed it. Nobody said a word. Then I laid down the security deed, and I put my finger on the signature, and I told them the same thing I told you. That is not my hand. My R hitches. That R runs smooth. I have had a tremor since I was 62, and there is no tremor on that page. And then I laid down beside it the program from their father's funeral, the one with the date printed right on the front, the 9th of April, and I laid the notary stamp next to it, the 9th of April, and I looked at my oldest son and I said, the state of Georgia has a sworn document saying I sat in an office and signed my house away on the very same afternoon the four of us stood at your daddy's grave. So one of two things is true, Preston. Either I have got a twin nobody told me about, or somebody in this room paid a woman named Colette Radley to swear to a lie. The room went so quiet I could hear the fluorescent light buzzing. I did not stop. I laid down Vantage Ridge Partners, and I read out the name of its sole managing member. And I watched Bethany turn and look at her husband like she was seeing him for the first time. I laid down the wire, showing the money went from the loan straight into that shell and out into the landings at Sawney. And I said, I never saw a dollar of it. So I have got to assume it went to save a project of yours that was already going under. And last I turned to Sharon. And this was the only part where my voice came near breaking. And I said, and you knew. Gregory pulled this house up on his computer months before I lost it. He saw it. He told you. And you decided the price of your silence was a debt your brother agreed to make disappear. You did not just fail to help me, Sharon. You watched a crime happen to your mother, and you held the door shut so I could not get back in. Preston tried. I will give him that. He went through all of it in about 90 seconds. First, he said it was a misunderstanding. Then he said Wade had put me up to this, poisoned me against my own family. Then, when Nadine mentioned the word forgery and the words district attorneyess in the same breath, real gentle, just laying it there, Preston's whole face came apart and he started to plead. Mama, please, he said. You do not understand the position I was in. The whole thing was going to collapse. I was going to lose everything. I was going to fix it. I was going to put the house back before you ever even knew. I never meant for you to get hurt. You never meant for me to know, I said. That is a different thing. Sharon opened her mouth to argue, reached for that doctor voice one more time, and found there was nothing in it. What could she say? The competency report was on the table. Her name was in the story now. She just closed her mouth and looked down at that cheap conference table, the way she had looked down at everything, and would not meet my eyes. I stood up. My knees ached and my hands were steady. I looked at the two children I had sold land and skipped meals and worn my body out to raise up into a developer and a doctor, and I told them the last thing I had to say in that room. A forged deed is void, I said. Nadine will tell you the law, but I will tell you the plain of it. That house was never legally yours to take. Preston, not for one single day, no matter whose name you paid to stamp on it. It has been mine the whole time. And now the district attorney is going to know it too. And Colette Radley is going to know it. And that lender is going to know it. And every soul at your country club is going to know it. You did not take my house. You just borrowed a year of my life. And you are about to pay it back with interest you cannot afford. And I picked up my folders. And I walked out of that room a whole different woman than the one who got put out on the sidewalk in the rain. Wade was waiting in the hall, and he stood up when he saw my face. And he did not have to ask that time either. He could see it. His mama had walked in there with a garbage bag full of grief and walked out with the truth in her hands. I would love to tell you that once the truth came out, everything got set right, quick and clean, the way it does in the movies. That is not how it went, and I promised you at the start I would tell it straight. The law is slow, and the law is a blunt instrument, and winning is not the same thing as getting made whole. Nadine was right about every bit of it, because the deed was forged, and a forged deed is void from the very beginning under Georgia law. The court did eventually restore the title to my name. On paper, the house came back to me. But here is the ugly part nobody tells you. The lender who put out that $180,000 did not just say, oh well, and walk away. There was a fight over who ate that loss. Months of it, lawyers and filings and a lien that had to be cleared. And untangling a fraud is a lot more expensive and a lot slower than committing one. Preston tore the thing apart in an afternoon with a forged signature. It took me the better part of a year, and more money than I care to say to sew it back together. And the money itself, the $180,000 my son borrowed against my life, that money was gone, poured into the landings at Sawney. And the landings at Sawney went down anyway, because a sinking project does not care whose house you feed it. The court gave me a civil judgment against Preston for every dollar of it, a nice big number on a nice official piece of paper. You want to know what a judgment against a bankrupt man is worth? About as much as the paper. You cannot squeeze water from a stone, and by then Preston was a stone. He had nothing left for anybody to take. I won and I collected almost none of it, and that is the honest arithmetic of what they call justice. But the criminal side, that was a different animal, and that one had teeth. The district attorney did not treat a forged deed and a false notarization as a family squabble. Colette Radley lost her notary commission and got charged. And last I heard, she was trying to trade what she knew to save herself, which meant she was trading Preston. Gregory got walked out of his job in the lending business, because a man who sees a fraud on his own screen and stays quiet does not get to keep working around other people's money. And he got pulled into the investigation besides. Sharon got a letter from the state medical board, the kind of letter that starts an inquiry, and her whole shining career went from certain to a question mark hanging in the air. And Preston was charged. Forgery and worse alongside it. His marriage came apart. Bethany took the kids and what was left and got as far away from the name Marsh as she could get. His company folded. The billboards came down. The man on the slate gray sign who was going to build the future of Cherokee County was, by that autumn, a defendant. And I want to tell you the truth about how that felt, because I think you have earned it. It did not feel good. I thought it would. There was a long stretch back on that mattress on Wade's floor where I dreamed about it feeling good, about watching it all come down on him. But when it actually came, I did not feel triumphant. I felt like a woman at a funeral, because that was my boy. That was the child who used to climb in my lap during the thunderstorms. I did not get to have both the truth and my son. I had to choose the truth. And the price of it was grieving a child who was still walking around alive. Nobody tells you that revenge and mourning feel almost exactly the same from the inside. As for Sharon, that door closed, and I let it stay closed. There was no big scene, no tearful reconciliation on a porch. She sent word through Wade that she was sorry. Once the medical board letter came and she had something of her own to lose, and maybe she was. But sorry that arrives the same week the consequences do is a different sorry than the kind that shows up when it costs you something to say it. I am her mother, and I will always be her mother. But I have learned the hard way that you can love a person completely and still not hand them the keys to your life a second time. Some doors you do not open again just because the person knocking shares your blood. Wade and Dana, my two who never asked for a thing. I made sure they were all right, and I did it the plain way. No grand gestures. When the house finally came clear and back in my name, I had Nadine put Wade on the deed alongside me, so that whatever happens to me, that boy and his family will always have a roof. And no forger and no sheriff and no clever son can ever put them out on a sidewalk in the rain. It is not a mansion. It is the same little 3-bedroom place with the creaky floors. And the oak tree Hank and I planted the week we bought it is still standing right there in the front yard. Taller than the house now. I did not want a bigger house. I wanted my house with my tree, full of the two people who ran toward me when everybody else bolted the door. A year on, near about, I was in the kitchen of that house on an ordinary evening, snapping beans into a bowl the way my own mother taught me 60 years ago, when there came a knock at the door. I opened it, and it was Preston. He was out on bond, waiting on his trial, and he did not look one thing like the man on the billboard. He had lost weight, and his clothes hung wrong, and he had a few days of gray stubble on him. And I found out he was living out of his car because there was nowhere else and nobody left. He stood on my porch, on the porch of the house he stole and I took back, and he could not hardly look at me. "Mama," he said, and his voice cracked right down the middle. "I am not here to ask you for anything. I swear I am not. I did not have anywhere else. And I wanted to say it to your face before the trial, in case I do not get another chance to." And then this grown man who had once had it all, put his face in his hands on my front step and cried like the little boy in the thunderstorm. "I lost all of it," he said. "Bethany, the kids, the company, my name. Everybody looks at me now the way people used to look at you in that doorway. And Mama, the worst of it is not being broke. I have figured that out finally. The worst of it is knowing I had a mother who would have crawled across broken glass for me, and I slammed a door in her face because I was scared of what the neighbors thought. That is the thing I cannot live with. Not the money. That. I stood there in my own doorway and I looked at my child. And I will not lie to you and say part of me did not feel the justice of it, him standing where I once stood, with a car full of his belongings the way I once had a garbage bag full of mine. But I am a mother, and a mother does not stop seeing the baby inside the man, even a man who did what he did. So I went in the kitchen and I fixed him a plate, a real one, hot meatloaf and beans and a piece of cornbread. And I brought it out to the porch and I put it in his shaking hands. And I sat down next to him on the step and I let him eat because I could not stand to watch my child go hungry no matter what he had done to me. But when he was done, I told him the truth, the same way I have told you the truth this whole time. I said, "Preston, you can have a hot meal off me anytime you are truly hungry, because I am your mother and I cannot help that and I do not want to. But the house is not yours. The money is not yours. The keys are not yours, and they are not ever going to be. You are not going to move in here, and you are not going to be put back in this will. You made your bed when you forged my name over your own daddy's grave." And I am too old, and I have too few years left to spend them stitching up holes you tore in your own life. You have got to go rebuild yourself, son. Nobody is going to do it for you. Not even me." He nodded. He did not fight it. And there was something in his eyes when he nodded. And it was not the hope of getting a check or a bed. It was something smaller and maybe realer than that. It was the plain relief of finding out that one single person in the whole world had not decided he was garbage, that his mother would still hand him a plate. Sometimes that is the only thing that has to survive, so a person has a reason to climb back up. He left before dark. I watched his car pull off, and Wade came and stood in the doorway next to me. And he said, real quiet, "Do you regret feeding him, Mama?" And I told him the truth. I said no, because if I had paid his cruelty back with my own, then he would have finally succeeded in turning me into something. Life is already sending that boy his bill. It is a big one and it is coming due, and I do not have to add one thing to it. But I am not going to let him drag this family down into the hole he dug for himself either. Loving him and rescuing him are two different things, and I finally know the difference. That evening, I sat out on the back porch while Dana put up the supper dishes, and Caleb showed me a spelling test with a big red A on it, and Wade sat on the step with a glass of tea, and the light came down gold through Hank's oak tree, and I talked to my husband the way I still do sometimes. In my head, I told him, "Hank, they came for our house, and they used your death to do it. And I want you to know I did not just lie down and let them. I read every page. I found every lie. And I got it back, honey. Not all the way, not clean. We lost some that we are not ever getting back. But the door to our home is ours again, and it is full of the right people, and your tree is still standing. Life does not hand you a tidy ending with a bow on it. Anybody who tells you different is selling something. I lost my husband. I lost a year of my life. I lost 2 children in about every way that counts except the blood. But I got the truth, and I got my house, and I got a son and a family who love me without a single condition on it, and at 69 years old, I have finally learned that that is not a small thing. That is damn near everything. Let me leave you with this, and then I will let you go. I spent my whole life reading papers so that other folks would not get robbed by the people they trusted. And still, the biggest lie of my life got signed in my name by the one child I trusted enough not to read the fine print. I got my name back off that page. But there are some things no notary stamp ever puts right, and the love you hand a child who throws it in the dirt is one of them. So I am not telling you this story to teach you to hate your children. I am telling you that being kind never once meant being blind, and loving somebody does not mean you have to let them walk across you to get where they are going. Read every page before you sign it, even when the person holding the pen out to you calls you mama. Especially then,